Hey guys, welcome to this Let's Build with CodeSmash video. And in this video, I'm actually going to show you how to build a microservice architecture with CodeSmash. So first of all, what is a microservice architecture? It's basically an architecture that represents some type of a business unit, but it's split into several different logical business units. So the reason why you would want to do that it's because it's easier for your developers, right? So either each developer or development team now needs to only focus on a small logical business unit. So for example, if you take your business and split it into separate business units, then each developer gets to focus on only one logical business unit. And this makes it much easier to reason about the actual business processes, and it's easier to also translate them into requirements and also implement them in a technical manner, meaning to actually build the IT infrastructure. So let's start by actually explaining what the building blocks of microservice architecture are. So the actual building blocks are the APIs. So what is an API? An API is basically a server that's online, and you have an access to this server. So let's suppose that you have a user of your website who needs to access some data. Your website is actually going to make a request to the API, and your API is going to make a request to your database. Once it gets the data, the database is going to send a response to the API, and here is where you can do some further processing on the data. For example, you can check if the user actually has the access rights to the data itself, and if he does, you will just be returning the data to the user. So this is basically how an API operates. Let's now go a bit deeper into how a API is actually defined. So each API is going to have an endpoint. So basically that's the URL by which you can actually access your API. And each URL is going to have several routes and also the identifiers. So routes are basically going to specify what type of data you are referring to, and the identifier is going to identify exactly which item you are going to either retrieve from the API or insert into your database through your API. And the way you're going to tell your API how this is going to be done is using these API methods. So basically, the first method is the get method, and it's basically telling your API that you want to retrieve, right? You want to get back some data from the database. So if you specify, for example, a route like this, so users and 1, you are going to get back the first user, the user with the ID 1, from your database. Now, on the other hand, if you specify the post method, you're expected to be posting some data to your API, meaning you want to insert data to the database. And with this route, you're basically telling your API that you want to insert a new user with the ID 2 to your database. And also with this specific method, you can actually post some data, for example, the name of the user, role of the user, and so on. Now with the third method, put method, this basically means that you are just updating the user. And with the delete, obviously, as the name says, you are expected to delete a certain user. Note that if you actually do not specify a identifier, for example with the get method, you can actually retrieve all the users back from your database. Now let's continue and see how exactly the APIs are going to be implemented in CodeSmash. What's the logical definition of each API that's going to be built with the CodeSmash's API Builder? So let's suppose now that you have some input data, right? And you want to transform that data into some output data. Let's say you have a list of users and you want to filter out the users who, for example, you do not want for specific purposes. For example, filter out all the users who are not administrators. And if you think about it, you can do several different such filtering processes. You can also add some values to each user and so on and so forth. So for example, in CodeSmash, we are actually going to be adding functions. So these are going to be visual blocks where each block represents a function that's going to transform your input data. So you're going to transform with function 1. Then you're going to transform that data with the function 2 and then with function 3 and so on as you define it. Lastly, once everything is done, you're going to be left with the output data, and depending on what you want to do, you can either insert this data into the database or simply retrieve and send this data back to the user through your API. Now that we understand how the data is going to get processed in CodeSmash, let's see what we are actually going to build today. Okay, so today we're going to build a complex system that actually consists of 3 APIs and also the fourth one that's going to be the main API. So let's suppose that we have a large and complex system where we have 3 departments in our company. And one department is only concerned with customers, the other one with purchases, and the third one with articles. So if you think about it, we are basically modeling a online store. So since this is the case, if you're pretty much now asking yourself, why would you want to have such a system that's split in 3 parts? Well, it's actually because it's now much easier for your developers to build a system, because they are only going to be focusing on one small business unit, and each unit is a logical whole, right? So customers are one logical whole, the purchases are also one logical whole, and the articles are one logical whole as well, because in the real world these are actually real entities, and it's much easier to reason about them. And if it's easier to reason about them, then it's easier to also translate the requirements into technical specifications and also to build them. Furthermore, that means each and every one of your backend development teams now gets to build a small system, which is much easier for them. But if you think about it, let's say that you have to show on your website each customer, and for each customer you have to show their purchases, and then for each purchase you have to show an article, and the article name, the price, and so on and so forth. Neither of these APIs has all the required data, so you will have to create one more API that's going to join all this data, so basically communicate with all these APIs and then display the data on the front end. With this setup, we are actually making it also easier for your front end developers, because now they will only have one system, meaning one API to work with. So what we are now going to build is basically a system where we have these APIs that can store and retrieve data for customers, purchases, and articles, and also then one main API that's going to communicate with each of these APIs, join the data, aggregate it in a way that we find useful, and then return it back to the user. And now that we finally know what we want to build, let's start building our APIs. First of all, we need to start by building the first API, and that's going to be our customers API. So just type in the name, the customers API, make sure to check the REST API here, and just click deploy. This is going to take around 2 minutes, so each API takes around 2 minutes to deploy, but you can still just go, and while it's deploying, you can go and create the other ones as well. So we're going to move on to the next one, and this is going to be our purchases API. We can just go here, again select the REST API and just click deploy. We're just going to wait and make sure that it has started deploying successfully. So the confirmation is here. We can go on to the next one, and that's going to be our articles API. So just type in the articles API and make sure to deploy. Yeah, this looks fine. This has been deployed as well. We're going to take one last step, and that's just creating the main one, which we're going to work on later. So this is going to be our online store API. This one's going to actually be contacting and getting the data from the other three APIs directly. So other three APIs are actually going to be communicating with their own databases, while this one's going to be talking to those three APIs and just joining their data. Let's start with our customers API first. You can see that it's still being deployed. So if you just wait for a couple of more seconds, it's going to be done. And we're going to start by adding routes. And here we can see that it has finally been deployed. Let's go and type in the route. So it's going to be customers route. And let's just deploy again. All the methods, all the functions for each route to get the data from the database and insert the data are going to be automatically implemented. We don't have to bother with that. So let's just quickly jump to the next one, which is going to be the next one. Yeah, let's take the purchases API. We'll take this one, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to implement the routes here as well. So what do we take? We'll take the purchases, going to be the purchases routes. And let's also add items, because if you remember, each purchase has several items. So we can deploy that now as well. All of these are automatically implemented. Lastly, we can go to the articles API and make sure we implement that one as well. So our route's going to be articles. That's fine. Just add. What else? Nothing else. We just deploy again. Once we've gotten the confirmation that deployment has started, we can just move on. And that seems to be fine. So now we're just going to quickly go and check our customers API and see how each of the routes are working. So let's go switch over to the functions tab, and you can see that the customers route is already selected. We have other routes as well. This one is used to add the data to the database. So let's start and see if this is going to work. All the functions are implemented. We're going to add a new customer with ID 1, and you can see that this is actually working. Now we're going to switch over and test the actual API through the URL. So in order to do this, we are going to manually have to post a JSON. So the JSON is actually going to have a name of the customer, right? So for example, our customer is going to be number 2. That's the ID 2, and the name is going to be Jimmy. So let's see how this works. And we're getting back success, so this looks good. Let's just check if this is actually working to our customers route. Let's check it. Oh, make sure to turn on the customers. This is just a hard-coded value to help with testing. And yeah, as you can see, we're getting both customers back. This is fine. And remove these values, skip them during execution. So this is fine. These are just here for testing purposes. So these values are going to basically just help you out. Let's do the same thing here for the articles and see if this works. We're gonna add. We're now gonna add some articles and see if we are adding them to the database. Make sure to remember that we are adding the name of the article now. So article number 1, let's say we're adding an apple. One more, we're gonna add, let's say, an orange. So we're getting back success, this is good. And the third one, let's say we're adding some grapes. Great, this seems to be working out just fine. Let's query for all the articles. Make sure to check this. So this is working fine. We're getting back all the data, all the articles in the database. So the fragment, you're going to have the fragment by default when you invoke the API. It's going to show the fragment of the route that you are using, and you don't have to implement that. This is just for testing purposes. We can now do the same thing for purchases. Just remember that when it comes to purchases, we need to add additional information. When we add a purchase, we actually need to have a reference to the customer who's doing the purchase. So every time we add a purchase, we add a reference to the ID of the customer who is purchasing. So just add a new field that's going to be called customer, and we're going to do a purchase for customer number 1. So we're getting back success, this is fine. Then the purchase number 2, again, it's going to be for customer number 1. And the purchase number 3 is going to be for customer number 2. Let's just check if the purchases are, yes, so we're getting back 3 purchases, and you can clearly see that we have 2 purchases for customer number 1 and 1 purchase for customer number 2. This is fine. Let's also do the same thing for the items, because if you remember, each purchase has several items that the customer has bought, basically added to his shopping cart. So when we're adding a new item, we need a reference to the actual purchase to which this item belongs to. So just add the purchase ID, and also make sure to add reference to the article that's actually being added to the basket. So let's start from 100. So this ID is going to be 100, and article number 1. So for the purchase number 1, we're adding article number 1 to the basket. We're also adding article number 2, and let's go to the next one. And yeah, article number 3. So purchase 1 has 3 articles in the basket. Now we're moving to purchase number 2. We're just going to add this and this. So purchase number 3 is going to have just 1 item. So we can now check all the items. Yes, we can clearly see this is all the data in the database, the purchases database, and at the bottom, all the items that have been purchased. So let's now quickly go to our online store API. That's our main API, where we are going to be invoking all of these 3 APIs. So what we have to implement in the online store API is actually requests to all 3 APIs. So instead of writing to its own database, it's actually going to send the data to each of the APIs so they can write it to their own database. So what we need is to copy the URL of the customer's API first, and let's try to make a call to this API with our main API and display the data. So what we're now going to display is basically all the customers that we have. Make sure to uncheck this so it's not implemented. This route is going to be implemented manually. And we're going to add purchases as well, because this is what we need. And also articles. So we have 3 entities here, and each entity has several routes, each one for its own API, so that we can request the data. And now we're going to implement the customer's route, which means we're adding a fetch function, which means this is the URL that we're going to be calling and storing the data in the result field. Let's just execute this quickly. Make sure to add the customer's fragment. And there you go. We're getting 2 customers back. This is working fine. Just make sure to tell CodeSmash that you want to return this result variable. This looks good now. We can just quickly deploy this to make sure that our progress is saved. Any changes that we've done, that they are saved to our online store API. So once it's confirmed, we can go to the next step. Now the next step is going to be adding a new customer to the API. So we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to help ourselves with some shortcuts so that we don't have to type out everything. We're going to take the routes, we're going to extract the route and extract actually the ID from the route that we're sending to the API. We don't need the last one actually, but we do need some hard-coded JSON data. And remember, that's just for testing purposes. We're going to skip the execution when we're actually calling the API. Let's see what we have to do. So this is the, we have to copy the URL. Let's go back here. Let's just copy this quickly. Let's go back and just copy it here. Just paste it here. It's fine. Make sure to change this. This is now a post request to the customer's route, but the post method. So this indicates that we are sending some data. So make also sure to stringify your JSON and store it into the body, because when you post something through your API, this body variable will already be present and it's going to hold all the values that you have posted to the API. Remember, we are just adding the name of the customer, and make sure to add the ID for the new customer. And the ID is going to be, I think the next one's going to be 3. Yeah, it's 3. And just make sure to take the body variable, which holds our data that we're posting to our API, and put it right here, and finally execute. And we're getting back success. This is good, which means we added a new customer. But we need to just go and check. Oh, make sure to skip this. So we're now gonna see if we got back some customer. Okay. So the third customer, the new one, has been added. This is fine. Let's now head over to our articles API, because we need to get the URL from there as well. Because we're going to do the same thing for this API, meaning we need to be able to get back some articles, and we also need to be able to add some articles to the API. So let's do the same thing. We're quickly going to go to the functions and now select, so this one's going to be the articles, right? The articles route. First, we're going to check if we can get back the articles. So just paste the URL right here. Make sure you call the articles route, and the result is going to be stored here. And of course, we are going to return the result. So let's see if this is working. Yeah, this works just fine. We're getting back all the articles. So we are now on our articles route, but this is a post route. So we need to change this to a post request, because now we're going to be adding a new article. Again, we're going to just help ourselves to some shortcuts so that we don't have to write everything. This is much better. These are hard-coded values. Make sure to turn them off later. We don't need this one. So the article's route, it's fine. Just make sure to stringify this. Okay, this is fine. And we don't need the type because that's handled on the API side. So the article, the new one's going to be a TV, let's say. And what's the ID going to be? I think it's going to be 4. Make sure to add the body that we're posting and the result. And then we're just going to return the result. Let's see if this works. Oh, we forgot something. Oh, of course, make sure to add the parameter, the ID of the new article. And now it's working fine, so success. Let's check out if this is fine. Yeah, we got all the articles, including the TV. So the new article has been added to the database. So we're now on our Purchases API because we are going to implement the same thing for the Purchases API. And we've copied the URL. And let's go back to our Online Store API. Here's the Purchases routes. Let's go to the functions. So which one are we going to implement now? Let's do the purchases first, the get method, just to see if we can get back the purchases. So just paste in the URL and make sure to save the result and return the result. Of course, we need to add this. This is fine. So the purchases route, let's invoke one more time. Okay, now we're getting back the data. This is fine. So now we need to do the last thing, which is to actually add a new purchase. Again, just adding some shortcuts. We don't have to write everything. Where is this one? Ah, yeah, the parse body. Okay, just move this here. It's much easier. We don't need this one actually, but fine. We'll remove it. So it's going to be JSON stringified to turn this JSON into a string. And so remember, when you're doing a purchase, you need to add the customer ID. So we're going to send a field called customer with the ID of the customer who's doing the purchase. So this is going to be customer number 1 in our case. And just remove this part. We don't need it because it's implemented on the back end of the other API. And the purchase ID, just make sure to add the body. This is fine. That's gonna be the result, right? And we need to return the result as well. Make sure that this is a post method because we're aiming at the purchases post route. And of course we need the parameter. Let's just try to execute this. Okay, we missed something. It says invalid route. Obviously the slash is missing. Let's try again. We're adding something unnecessary. Okay, this is unnecessary. Now it's much better. So we've added a new purchase. Let's just quickly go and check how many purchases we have right now. Yeah, you can clearly see that the 4th one has been added for customer number 1. So now that we've done that, we have to go and also add the items. So if you remember, first let's make sure we uncheck the hard-coded parts. And let's move on. So these are all the hard-coded values that are going to actually be present when you make the API request, so you don't have to have these available. You can just skip the execution of these, and they will be in your execution of your API whenever you make the API request. This is just for testing purposes. So moving on to our online store API, if you remember that each purchase needs to have a couple of items, and what we're going to do is actually add those items right now. So let's start. Okay, we're going to take the body. Make sure to start from 110. Take the body that we're going to be posting, and remember, we're for each item we need to have a reference to the purchase, and of course to the article. So these are the two things that we're going to be adding. Let's see if this works. First one is fine. The second one going to be article number 2. And we're adding these to the purchase for all of them. Once we're done, we're just going to skip the execution of this and deploy. So it started deploying successfully. This is good. We can now go to the most important route. We can go to the customers, take the customers API. And now we are going to create a new route. So what we have to do right now is make sure that for each customer, for a specific customer, we can get all the purchases. And these purchases need to contain all the items and also the names of the articles. So these are going to come from all 3 APIs. Let's just remove all of this. We don't need any of these. We can leave this one. This one is fine. We're going to be testing for customer number 1 anyways. So this is the correct route. Let's help ourselves again to some shortcuts. We have this one, so let's just remove. This is fine. We're extracting the ID with this and also the body. In this case, we can just do it like this. So the first fetch that we're adding, if you remember, is going to be to a specific customer. So we can call this one the current customer. This fetch is going to get our customer. Let's see if this, this works. The first customer is here, and this customer, if you remember, needs to have all the purchases and all the items. So let's make another fetch request to the purchases API. So what we're going to do is just copy the URL, add another fetch request just after this one, and make sure you remove this. You don't need this. This one's going to be for the purchases. So this is going to give us back the all the purchases in the database. So let's see if this works. Yeah, this works fine. All the purchases are here. And next it's the items. So we can fetch the items as well. So just store it into the all items variable. And all the items are indeed here. But if you remember, this is not really what we want, because with these 2 last fetch calls, we are actually getting all the data back, meaning all the purchases for all customers, and also all the items for all the purchases that any customer has made. So what we will have to do is actually filter out those that we do not want. So first things first, let's also get the articles, because each item needs to have an article name. So let's try that first. Let's minimize this so this is not in our way. And this is working just fine. Last one. Let's go to the bottom. Yeah, the article names are now here. So we have all the pieces of data. It's time to start joining them. And once they're joined, we're going to add them to the customer. So each customer is going to have all their purchases, all the items for each specific purchase, and the name of the article as well. So how are we going to do this? Let's start, which one? So let's add this special join function. It takes actually two arrays that are going to be joined into one array. So for the first array, let's just start with all purchases, right? And then all items. This is going to be our second array. And then we have to provide a join function. So this function is going to take two parameters. One is going to be each purchase, and the other each item. And then we're going to join them on some equality. So in our case, we are going to take the ID of the purchase and then the purchase reference in each item, so that each item goes to each own purchase. Lastly, we need to provide the mapping function. That's basically telling us what we're going to be returning back, what kind of a JSON format. So it's going to be an array, and it's going to have a JSON which has an ID field, which, as you can clearly see by p.pk, indicates the purchase ID, right? But it's also going to have items field, and this items field is going to have all the items for this specific purchase. So how do we do that? But it's actually quite simple. We just take all the items and filter out the ones that have the purchase equal to the current one that's currently being filtered, and that's p.pk. And we just have to save this under, let's call it something like all purchases and items. So if we execute this, let's see what we get back. Let's scroll to the bottom. You can clearly see this is looking good. We have a couple of purchases here, right? 3 and 2 and 4, and at the bottom there's 1, and you can clearly see that they have, each of them has an items field with several purchases, and each item has the correct ID of the purchase. So this is good. We've done well. We've joined the data well, but this is not everything. If you remember, each of these items actually has to have an article name. This is what we want to show. So we have to do one more join. Let's continue with one more join. So here we are using another join, and now we're going to be joining is actually all items with all the articles. And that way we are going to be able to add the article name to a specific item. So where is it? Okay, so this is all articles. Let's just post it here, and let's just do the same thing, copy paste. So here we are indicating this as I as an item and A as an article. So our item, actually we need to take the reference, so that's the article in this item. And for the article, it's just going to be the PK. That's our primary key. And just copy paste here. So the question is, how is this going to look like? What do we want our end result to be? So it's going to have an ID, right? Just put it as the ID of the item that has been bought. And let's just add, of course, what we came here for, the name of the article. So that's article.name. And then we have to add the purchase, the ID of the purchase, just so that we can join it back to the purchases. And that's going to be item.purchase. And let's store it as all items and articles. Let's go and execute this and see what we get. Scrolling down to the bottom, we get the correct result. So every single item now has a purchase and also the name of the article. This is exactly what we wanted, but we're actually not done yet. So what we now have to do is make sure that this data is actually in each purchase. So the items need to be joined before the purchases are joined. And we're replacing all items with all items and articles array. So here as well. So we are going to be joining it with this one that actually has the names of the articles. This is much better. So let's just execute this. And there you go. You're now getting, in each purchase, you are indeed getting all items, but they also have the article name. Now, we are still not done because if you remember, I said these are literally all the purchases that are in our database, meaning for all the customers, but we do not want purchases for all the customers. What we want are all purchases for a specific customer. So the only thing that's now left to do is to actually filter them out and make sure we only return the ones for our current customer. We're going to now add another variable right here to make sure that we filter out all the purchases. So we use the filter function and we just say that in this here purchase, the reference to the customer needs to be our current customer. So that's the parameter that we're passing in. If that's fine, it's going to be customer number 1. And you can see that there is one customer number 2, which is what we don't want. Now let's try to execute this. So this is now executing, it's filtering out the data, and yeah, you can now see that in the all purchases, there's only customer 1 reference. There's no customer 2, which is what we wanted. And now we have only the purchases and items for customer 1. So now that we have the purchase data finalized, there's only one last thing to do, and that's to make sure that our current customer has all this data assigned to it. So let's add a new field called purchases to our current customer, and let's take the purchases and items variable and assign it to the customer. And we're going to make sure to also return the current customer. We are going to execute this. So this is now being executed. It's running fine. We are getting back the data. Let's see. We have the current customer with all the purchases assigned to it, and you can see all the correct IDs. This is fine. This is looking good. And so, yeah, the only thing that's now left to do is to actually go and deploy this. And we can go and see how we are actually going to invoke this from our API testing tool. And we can go and do the testing. So we're taking this route, the customer purchases, and let's test for customer number 1. Always remember that the first invocation takes time. There you go. This is our first customer with its ID and also all the correct purchases for this customer with all the items, and each item has an article name, which is exactly what we wanted. Let's try for customer number 2. Yes, we're getting back data for the customer number 2, only one purchase. And let's try this here. Customer number 3 doesn't have any purchases, and that's that. So guys, I hope you liked the video, because more of these Let's Build with CodeSmash videos are on the way for Next.js and Bubble. So until next time, I'll see you then.